I thought selling was you somehow get in front of people and blah, 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 blah. You talk about what, and that doesn't really work. For the first few months, I really floundered because I had no formal sales training. The only sales training was go out and sell. I had the motivation, but I didn't have the information.
How did that influence you in what you're doing today, Bob?
I was doing news, and I wasn't very good at it. It's when the boss said, "You're not going to make it as a TV guy."
Oh, okay.
I didn't read them. I devoured them. Every night after I'd come home and I would read, I'd study, I'd highlight, I'd underline, I'd take notes, I'd practice, I'd drill, and for your first 3 weeks later, my sales are going through the roof. Now I had a methodology. Now I had a system. So that just changed everything for me. All things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. What is selling? It's
Hey, welcome to another edition of Influence Today with Chad Tart and Terry Lyles. We're in a different environment today. Want to thank Dennis Cunningham for allowing us to be in AirTab podcast studio. We've been in many places, but this is definitely unique and different. Welcome, Terry. How you doing?
Great to be here. And again, thank you, Dennis and AirTab. We love this studio. This is really the first time we've been here doing this, but we've done meetings here. And it's a great facility and looking forward to doing more.
Yeah, absolutely. The show is called Influence Today. It's about influence, what influences us. You know, whether it's the people, the environment like we're in today, whether it's the people that surround you, whether it's the media, whether it's the news, it all has influence. And today we have someone special we want to introduce you to who influenced us and influenced many people, including Dave Ramsey, Bob Burg, who wrote the book, The Go-Giver.
Hi, great to see you, Chad. Hello, Terry. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Well, Bob, welcome to the show. There's a lot of commonalities that we all have. We appreciate you being here today. You write books. Terry writes books. You coach people. Terry coaches people. And also you were in broadcasting. I was in broadcasting. You were in broadcasting. I guess you started out in Boston, which is a town I went to college in. How did that influence you in what you're doing today, Bob?
Well, starting out in radio, and I really loved doing radio, and I was doing sports at that time. When I got my job in television, it was in a very small town, Midwestern U.S. It was a very small ABC affiliate, and I was doing news, and I wasn't very good at it. Tom Brokaw, I was not. Okay, I mean, I could read the news, right, but I certainly wasn't a journalist. I was, I think, 24 years old. I didn't really know the news, and I didn't really care. And I was probably a little too positive for the medium anyway. My idea of a good opening would have been, "Hi, everyone, I'm Bob Burg in the news tonight. Everything's great.
Right.
Nothing's that. Go to sleep." You know?
I don't think people will be watching that.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't sell very
Right.
well, apparently. So I wasn't really long for that, and I graduated into sales, and that was another story. But the great part about radio and TV for me was that after I became an author and I was a guest, it helped me become a much better guest. I also knew how stories were produced. So when I did videos, so all that experience, everything we do is an experience that we can utilize in order to advance in some way. So, I wasn't really good at it, but it was very helpful.
Hey, that's great. Did you get into the sales department also?
So when I realized that I wasn't going to be making it as a TV guy,
What gave you that realization?
it's when the boss said, "You're not going to make it as a TV guy."
Oh, okay.
Then I got it. I always said I graduated into sales. And for the first few months, I really floundered because I had no formal sales training. And I'm pretty sure where I worked, they didn't really either, because the only sales training was go out and sell. And yeah, so I went out there, I knocked on doors, I made calls, I did all those things, but I thought selling was you somehow get in front of people and blah, 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 blah. You talk about what, and that doesn't really work. And I think you and I had once chatted about this. I had what the old, the great business philosopher Jim Rohn would have said, I had the motivation, but I didn't have the information.
That's a good line. In fact, that's a great line.
And you got to have both, because you can have all the information in the world, but if you're not motivated to go out there and do it, you're not going to accomplish a lot either. So it's not an either or, it's both. So I went to a bookstore looking for something. Now this is 40 years ago. And back then sales information wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah, you're
And unless
absolutely
you
right.
knew about
Yeah.
it, you didn't really know. But I went in the bookstore for something. I didn't know what. And I see these two books on the shelf. One was by Tom Hopkins and the other was by Zig Ziglar. And those are two of the icons, in the
Mhm.
sales space. And just seeing, and the Tom Hopkins book was called How to Master the Art of Selling.
Which a great title, wasn't it?
Great title. And right there, I said, wow, what? There's an art to doing this. There's a way of doing this, a methodology. So I took the books home. I paid for them first, but I took the books home. And I like to say, I didn't read them. I devoured them. And I mean, every night after I come home and I would read, I'd study, I'd highlight, I'd underline, I'd take notes, I'd practice, I'd drill, and I'd rehearse. 3 weeks later, my sales are going through the roof. Now, why? Because there was certainly not a whole big difference in Bob Burg 3 weeks, from 3 weeks earlier. No, now I had a methodology. Now I had a system. And I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability.
Wow.
If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. So that just changed everything for me. But the best part of all, because now I start studying all these sales books, I'm getting all these cassette tape albums, that's what they were called at the time, right? Uh, and I'm going to seminars. But what I'm learning is that there's all these other materials, not necessarily on the how-to aspect, which isn't very important, but also on the building yourself on the inside aspect.
Mhm.
So now, it's getting the books like Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and Schwartz's The Magic of Thinking Big, and Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maltz, and The Greatest Salesman in the World by Mandino, and all these fantastic books that are building you now on the inside. And I come to realize success is really an inside job. It manifests itself outwardly, sure, but it begins in here and then in here, the head to the heart.
Mhm.
And you start working on yourself and becoming the kind of person that is worthy of being successful. And that was just a big, that's really, to me, when my education started as an adult.
Hey, that's a big thing you talk about, Terry, because it all starts up here, right?
Absolutely. It's a psychological awareness of who we are and who we're not. And, when we look in the mirror, we see who we are. Others see us who we are when we look past them. The interesting thing is we don't see things the way they are. We see things the way we are. And that's a very powerful difference, because when I look in the mirror, or you look in the mirror, as I train athletes and executives and corporate people, I want them to look in the mirror and see what they see. But then how do they project that onto others? Because others see us very differently than we see ourselves, and vice versa. So as a result of this, the psychological awareness of I see you, you see me, how do we impact others as a result of that by saying, I'm going to be me today with a plan. I'm going to do what I need to do to be the best me I can be. So it's not what I think you see, it's what I project that I see in you and you in me.
Right. And you bring up a fantastic point, because it all begins with our set of beliefs.
Mhm.
That belief system. What is a belief? Well, a belief is simply a subjective truth.
Yes.
It's the truth as you or I understand the truth to be, which means it
Right.
might be the truth, or it might be a belief.
Your truth.
Right, our truth,
Yeah.
right. And our truth is a belief.
But it comes from what influences us,
So,
too.
well, it does.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
exactly where it comes from. And it's before we were ever old enough to begin questioning our premises. So our belief system is really based on upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, everything we see, touch, taste, feel, smell, what have you, and all the individual experiences we've had. Now, and by the way, and we pretty much know this, that most of this is already kind of set in stone by the time we're little more than toddlers.
Yes.
And after that, every experience comes in and simply goes through that lens. So most people, they grow up, they live a life subject to what I call an unconscious operating system,
Mhm.
thinking that they and we all are making decisions based on thought, consciousness, and logic, when really it's based on a matrix. If you remember the movie, right? The Matrix, only
Right.
instead of machines, it's all the information that was given to us that we accepted before we ever had a chance to question premises and ask, well, why? How did this person know that? Who's, and so until we understand this, we're really trapped inside a set of beliefs we don't even know we have.
Yeah.
It's only when we make the unconscious conscious
Yeah.
that now we can work effectively within this. Well, now let's go back to something you said about looking in the mirror as human beings, we also tend to believe that the way we see the world is the way everyone else sees the world, which makes intuitive sense. How could it be any different? It's all we know. This is why you hear people say things like, oh, nobody wants that. Or I would never speak that way to someone. No, you wouldn't. I wouldn't, but someone else would. That's why when it comes to sales, see, we think the value of our product or service, what we love about it, what we're crazy about our product or service, we think that's what the other person's going to be crazy about
Right.
too, right?
Right.
But they're not necessarily.
Right.
And that's why I believe the discovery is the most important part of the sales conversation, because we must ask questions and then listen in order to determine, because when you think about it, what is selling? It's discovering what the other person needs, wants, or desires and helping them to get it. And we can't do that without asking questions and really, really.
Seeing ourselves as we are, in the leadership, the coaching side of it is the perception of reality and what that really means. And when people talk about believing something or they have a belief system, the Greek word is pisteuo. It means to cling to, hang to with all your might. It means you're hanging from a rope. So how much do you believe in the rope? If the rope broke, you got nothing. So if you really believe something, you're dangling from a rope to climb up because that's your only lifeline. So when we talk about belief and how that life works around us, what do others believe about us? What do we believe about them? What do we believe about the system of what we're training and speaking about? And how that impacts and influences all of us as leaders. So as Chet and I do coaching, this is what we're trying to do, is help people understand what you believe in. Others may not, but you have to persuade them to believe what you believe. And that becomes the art of practicing this thing called belief.
Hey, let me talk about something else, how you got the belief. You believe that you could get better. So there are a couple other elements that you haven't brought up. One is that you were disciplined, that you're going to read these books. Number two is that you put them into play. You actually executed what you saw. And then the third one is that you practiced doing this. And I think the word consistency is so important because you went over and over and over and over and over again. So you didn't get better just by reading the book. You actually did something. What did you notice about yourself after going out? The confidence level must have changed also.
Oh, absolutely it did. And so, it's funny when you say disciplined, I'd like to think that. I think it started with desperation, though. Because I realized, I knew what I now knew what I didn't know.
Yeah. But desperation equal discipline because you
Yes.
wouldn't have done
Yes,
it.
yes,
So you
yes.
wouldn't have done it.
Exactly.
You wouldn't have done it.
Oh, exactly. And, one point you bring up that I think is so very important, and that is taking action.
Yeah.
A great author from years ago, Robert Ringer, calls it a bias toward action, right? And, it doesn't mean we should act on every idea. It's, we want to make sure it's but when the information's there that you believe in, and you have good reason to believe that it's good information, and certainly Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins were too, then you need to act. You need to act, and you need to know that you're going to get a lot of no's, and you need to know that you're not going to be perfect.
So you were in broadcasting and you decided to write a book called Endless Referrals, right? And so you're thinking about that. Well, what we need to talk about is how that book came about. And then also, Terry, you can talk about how difficult it is to write a book.
Sure.
Well, I knew that when I was in sales, the part that I dislike the most is what most salespeople dislike the most, and that's the prospecting process. We'd all love to just have a whole bunch of sales conversations every day, right? Well, that's not reality. Life is not like that. And when you're first starting out, that doesn't happen. So Endless Referrals came out of my being able to do a workaround to that and having a system, creating a system. And when I say creating, I mean, I learned so much from others, but then you take what you learn and you put it into ways that work for you, in such a way that you could build relationships with people that would lead to those sales conversations and or referral business. So when I wrote Endless Referrals, it was for those entrepreneurs and salespeople who they knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought lots of value to those they served, but they didn't necessarily have the confidence or the know-how at that point to meet people within their communities. 'Cause this is way before the internet, right? In their communities, and develop those relationships where people would want to buy from them and or refer business to them. Now, the main the underlying premise of Endless Referrals was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. The book taught how to get to that point. And the focus and it's by placing the focus on how you can add value to another person. And that has to start long before the sales conversation. It's when you first meet that
Yeah.
person. How do you, when you're in an initial conversation with someone, regardless of where you meet them, how do you have a conversation with them in such a way that you make them feel good about themselves, make them feel good about you, and have them say to themselves, "Wow, that's a person I want to get to know."
Can you give me an example?
Sure. And I've got to say, one of the things I first learned when I started in sales was that, or, when I started to, after those first few months, and, I did prospecting both by phone and in person, but I'd be on the phone and make these calls, and I was teleprospecting, so I was prospecting by phone, I was building relationships by phone, I was closing sales on the phone. But one of the things I figured out pretty quickly was that nobody ever hung up the phone on me while they were talking.
Mhm.
Okay? Now, if I'm talking, that's different. They're not interested. If I'm talking about my product, my service, how long we've been in
Bro.
business, why we're number one in the market, right? But they're off the phone. They're out of there. If they're talking about themselves, no, they're engaged. And it's the same thing whether you're on the phone, whether you're on Zoom, whether you're in person, whether if you've ever been in a conversation with someone who let you do practically all the talking, right, about yourself, didn't you come away from that conversation saying to yourself, wow, what a fascinating conversationalist that person is, right? We can be that fascinating conversationalist. We all can be, but not by making it about us, by making it about them. For example, I have what I call feel-good questions. Feel-good questions are simply questions that, by their very nature, cause that other person to feel good about themselves and, by extension, feel good about you. So let's say you meet someone. His name is Gary. He sells copying machines to businesses. And the first feel-good question just might be, so Gary, how did you get started selling copying machines? Now, a little bit more elegant way would be, how did you get started as an office products professional? Okay, to edify just a little bit more. Now, this is not a clever question. It's not a slick question. In fact, it's a very, very mundane question. How did you get started, basically doing whatever it is that person's doing? But people love to answer that question. Why? Because you're giving them a chance to tell their story.
Mhm.
Right? And really, nobody asked them to tell their story. Nobody's asking Gary to share how he got into. Gary's own family has never asked Gary to share his story. And here you are, who he just met, who, rather than talking about yourself and your product and your services, you're asking Gary to be the star. Okay, and he's going to tell you, and he's going to enjoy that he's doing it. The second question, with kind of a follow-up question to that, is what do you enjoy most? What do you enjoy most about what you do? You may set that up with, wow, you must have had some fascinating experiences over the years. What do you enjoy most about your work? Now, that's a feel-good question. It elicits a feel-good response, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to, immediately trying to find his pain, right? Reach into his heart and tear it out so you can come to the rescue with your terrific products or services. No, he's not ready for that yet. And so what you want to do is ask, instead of finding his pain, find his joy. What do you enjoy most about what you do? So much better than, so Gary, what do you just hate most about your work? And,
Mhm.
while we're at it, how about this wretched excuse for a life you live? I mean, you might as well ask the same thing, right? And so now let's find his joy. Now, you've asked a couple of these feel-good questions. I have 10 of them, but you'll never have time to ask more than 2 or 3. You don't have to, right?
Mhm.
But then there's what I call the one key question that will just set you apart. It will distinguish you from everyone else he's been in a conversation with. And it sounds something like this: Gary, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good potential customer or client for you? How can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good prospect for you? Now, an elegant way to set that up would be, Gary, I always enjoy connecting good people with other good people. Tell me, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good potential client for you? Now, what have you done when asking that question? A couple things. One, you've continued to focus on him, right? And this is how an introvert, because believe it or not, I am an introvert. And this is how an introvert, someone who doesn't, feel, want to, this is how you feel comfortable. You take the pressure off yourself
Mhm.
and you ask questions which make the other person the star. Okay. So that's the first part. The second thing is just the way you frame the question. You're basically asking him to share with you how to add value to his life, which he feels very grateful for. Okay. So, how's Gary going to answer? So again, Gary, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good prospective client for you? And he thinks about it for a second because he probably hasn't been asked this question before. And he says, well, if you're ever in an office and you notice a copying machine, and next to that copying machine's a waste paper basket, and that waste paper basket's filled to the rim and overflowing with crumpled up pieces of paper, that's a really good sign that copying machine hasn't been working well lately, and that would be an excellent prospect for me. So Gary has just told you, he's just shown you how to add value
Mhm.
to his life. Now, by the way, if the person you're talking to isn't in sales, and we probably all agree everyone's in sales, we're all in sales, but if they're not, if prospects or clients wouldn't be, making, for example, they're the CEO, or they're in the accounts payable, or they're an engineer, something in which prospects aren't of value to them, you'd simply, same principle, but you change it a little bit. How can I know if someone I'm speaking with would be a good connection for you, or would be someone you'd like to meet? Same thing.
Mhm.
And so basically, that's how we have a conversation that takes 5 to 7 minutes. And at the end of that conversation, and then you get this person's contact information so that you are able to follow up and follow through and so forth. And right there, you've just you've made a friend, and you've got someone who they're looking at you as someone they would like to get to know.
Well, you finished that book. That was exciting to listen to. And then for some reason in your mind, you wrote another book called The Go-Giver. I really want to get into that in our second visit here on Influence Today. Somebody wants to get in touch with you to buy the book or contact you. How do they do that?
Best place is Burg, BURG.com. Everything's there.
Okay, thanks. And Terry, how do you get in touch with you?
TerryLyles.com, TerryLyles.com. And I look forward to diving more into this in the next segment, that we can see this whole process and how it works out, and writing books and the chaos involved. And most importantly, the influence we can have on other people around us.
Great. Thank you. Hey, if you like the show, we'd appreciate it if you could help us out. The algorithm works very well when you hit like and you also share it. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to our second episode when we get deeper into the Go-Giver. Thanks for watching Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.